everybody, and welcome to a brand new edition of Cardinal Territory. I'm Jim Hayes, joined by Matt Holliday and Kyle Gibson. Generally speaking, we're also joined by Lance Lynn. He's on a hunting trip. He was supposed to be here. We thought we would talk to him via a tree stand of some sort, or maybe with a carcass, posing with a carcass. It didn't happen, but gentlemen, it's nice to see you guys.
Good to see you,
Good
Jim.
to see you, Jim. As always.
Doesn't seem like you're that sincere, Matt. Well, the off season is now upon us, and in St. Louis, that means it's Heim time. Heim Bloom takes over as the president of baseball operations. He's been around with the organization for over a year, so he knows the lay of the land. He knows the cards that he's been dealt. He's already made some improvements to certain areas, beefed up things at the minor league level, the developmental level. But now he's got the ball. So, Matt Holliday, I'm going to start with you. What should job one now be for Heim Bloom?
Well, I think you have to decide um, how. Well, first of all, you should already know kind of the areas that you're going to target as far as improving your major league roster. Um, I think that you start to look and you're starting to see guys opt in, opt out of their options and there's new free agents coming into the free agent pool that maybe you didn't expect. So I think just continuing to gather information um, as you head into the general managers meetings, where a lot of talks start to begin as far as trades go. You start thinking about, I guess, I'm sure he knows his budget as far as free agents go, as far as filling in the major league team. What are your goals? Is your goals, again, as we've talked about before, are your goals to win the World Series in 2026? Are your goals to take a step closer to the playoffs? Are your goals to continue to develop younger players and give guys like JJ Weatherholt and potentially like a Tink Hintz or some of the other young talented players they have in the minor leagues, give them opportunities? So I think I'm sure they have this game plan, but I think the next step for me is probably deciding what free agents you might be in on, and then you start to gather information on trade value. They've talked about trading Nolan and Sonny and Contreras possibly, and so I think once GM meetings hits, that's when you start gauging the interest on trades and guys that you're trying to get to move, and then what you can get in return.
Now, it's hard to know what he's going to do, Kyle, but Heim Bloom has basically said, we want to be long term. So they will have an eye toward the current team and do the best they can, because he said they want to be competitive, but they also want to do it right for the long term, Kyle. So when you look at this ball club, you played for them, before, and I know you keep in touch with some folks in the Cardinals. What areas would you look at if you're Heim Bloom in terms of the upcoming season?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the one of the more fun discussions we had, Jim, was a few weeks ago with you, Lance, and I about kind of what we would do if we were in Heim's shoes, and um, I think personally, I feel like this is a team that with a couple additions and not subtractions, I think they're a playoff team. Um, Maybe that's being a little bit of a homer since I was on the team. I don't know, but I agree with everything Matt said. I think the one thing that I would add is they have a lot of players in my mind that are somewhat in like this transition time where, and what I mean by that is they need to figure out with extra outfielders and extra infielders who are the guys we're going to move forward with. And not that you have to trade or release those guys, but you kind of have to have a plan going into spring training. What's the plan for player A, B, and C? Because right now they don't fit on our major league roster. Do we want to trade those guys as well, or are we going? Do we have the ability to use an option and send them to the minor leagues and hopefully have them be a part of the major league, roster at a later date. So they just have some guys kind of in that interesting stage of their career where they're a couple years in, and maybe they're still trying to find their way, but the decision time is going to have to be here sooner than later on, are they going to be a part of this Cardinals franchise or not? And if they are, what's their role going to be?
I think they do have a plan in place. And look, Sonny Gray has already said he'd be open to a trade this time around. He has a no trade clause. Wilson Contreras said uh, he wants to stay. He's got a no trade clause. And that brings us to Nolan Arenado, who has a no trade clause. Jeff Passan just reported that Nolan said he'd be open to more teams this time around. The Cardinals were looking to deal him last year. And Matt, I know you're good friends with Nolan Arenado. How do you think this all shakes out for him?
Well, I mean, I think he gets dealt somewhere. I mean, I think as the report I'm sure is that it's at this point in Nolan's career, it's you got to find the right fit. Um, there has to be a need from the team, and so yeah, I mean, you, I think that there's got to be some willingness on his part to maybe go some places that uh, maybe he didn't really, maybe last year really want to go to. So I think that particularly the way they ended the season last year, I think both sides have pretty much decided that they'll do whatever it takes to get something done to move on from his time in St. Louis. So I think something will happen. I think he'll get moved. I don't know where. It'll be interesting. I think a lot of that comes down to where does Alex Bregman end up back in Boston, and some of the other third base options. So yeah, I mean, I think at the end of the day, when we're talking about Nolan, March 1st, he'll be on another team, and it just kind of depends on as far as return goes, how much money the Cardinals are willing to eat. Will probably buy them a better prospect. So we'll see. It's going to be interesting.
Nolan Arenado
Hold
was
on, Jim.
injured.
Jim, I got a question. Jim, I know I did
Yeah,
this in our last. I did this with serving it up, on the previous
yeah,
podcast. I
yes,
have a
sir.
question. Can I step in here?
Yeah, go ahead.
Maybe I don't really know that what's going on here, but why is it actually helpful now, the second off season going into this and making the goal of trading him out front? Like, do we feel like last offseason that kind of, in my mind, hindered their ability to move him because everybody knew that's what the plan was? And then I feel like, what if they use that against them, saying, "Oh, well, they want to move him anyway, so it's not give him as much, in the deal." I don't know. Maybe I'm way off on that, but you know, I feel like that might have hurt him a little bit last year.
And there's no question he was hurt at the tail end of last season, wanted to come back, came back, looked like Nolan. And now his offensive numbers have dropped off, but that guy, highlight reel defense, game in and game out, and he showed he still has it. And there's still gas in the tank, and he wants to play. What do you think, Matt? I mean, do you think
Yeah.
maybe the approach is wrong in terms of how they're handling Nolan?
Yeah, I mean, I thought that last year to some extent of, why. Um, but I look, they pretty much, when you do the swan song, the farewell uh, ending of last year, I think they're pretty much saying that, they're willing to do whatever it takes to move him. Which, like you said, Kyle, I think there's certainly hurts your leverage. I mean, I don't know that. You can still take him back. I mean, I guess just like this year. I mean, I guess at the end of the day, if nobody will give you anything and they want you to eat all the money, that he could come back and play third for the Cardinals next year. But um, it certainly felt like both sides are going to do whatever it takes, and I don't ever think that helps your leverage to make that kind of statement or set up that kind of ceremony as they did last year. Look, I appreciate the fans getting an opportunity to give Nolan the ovation that he deserved, and sort of their appreciation for the years that he's put in there. But like Lance said, or sorry, like Kyle said, it's certainly. I mean, if I'm negotiating with them, I know that they're already have kind of moved on. So we'll see. But yeah, I don't really see the purpose of it other than to make sure that Nolan got an ovation from the crowd.
And that guy can still play, in my opinion. Summer is in the rearview mirror, but imagine this: your own backyard, an oasis, a pool for the kids, a fire pit for the cool nights, and we're talking about a place where memories are made. At Merrimack Pool and Outdoors, they've been bringing those kind of visions to life for over 25 years. Family owned, STL proud, and trusted to build your dream backyard. And not just pools, we're talking about full outdoor kitchens, we're talking about sport courts, those fire features, and smart pool technology, LED lighting, the whole shooting match. And from concept to completion, Merrimack Pool and Outdoors handles everything, takes the worry out of it. If you're ready to upgrade your backyard, just check out splashstl.com. Free consultations and backed by a lifetime manufacturer's warranty. Make your backyard a place that everyone wants to be. Merrimack Pools and Outdoors. Visit splashstl.com. So, Kyle, I got to ask you this. So, as the Cardinals are shuffling things and figuring out, like you said, who they want to keep, where they want to go, what this team is going to look like in this coming season, I'm going to ask you, who do you think is most likely going to be traded? And outside the guys we talked about, Arenado, maybe Wilson, maybe Sonny. And I'm not talking about guys you think should be traded. I'm just talking about guys that you think will bring value, or maybe what other teams want that they'll be willing to give up more.
Yeah, Jim, this goes back to your question once again a couple weeks ago where you asked Lance and I to trade people, but yet when we asked you which media personalities from the St. Louis market needed to go, you did not give us an answer. So you're able to ask us this question, understanding that you don't have to answer it. So
I'll
a little
answer it
bit
at the
unfair
end.
here,
I'll
but
answer it at the end.
yeah, yeah, we'll get to that question later of which of those beat writers the Cardinals need to move on from. I don't know. I think it's tough. Like I said earlier, I think this team is close to being a good team. I think they are, a good team in many regards. I think Sonny Gray is somebody who, sure, he didn't have the same year this year as he had in 2024. He's still a staple to a rotation that can make. He's a difference maker. I think Wilson Contreras adapted to first base really well. He and Alec Burleson, with Burley's versatility going to the outfield and first base, they're difference makers. So Nolan's defense changes the game. And I think his offense has the ability to come back at any time because he showed spurts here in 2025. So I personally would be in the boat of adding, finding a couple players here and there, maybe on one-year deals, still giving you that flexibility to at the deadline if you need to move Nolan, okay. At the deadline if you need to move Sonny, okay. Because I think those are the times that you can still get a lot of return, but still shift and give the Cardinals fans, that possibility of the playoffs. And if it doesn't work out, then I don't think you've lost yourself a whole lot. But that's why I'm sitting here and I was only a player and not in the front office.
All right, Matt, I'm going to put it to you. And I'm not saying who should be traded. I'm not saying, this, all these guys you want on your team, but I'm talking about guys you offer up that will bring a return.
Yeah, I mean, I think that when you're in the situation the Cardinals are in, everybody's available. I think for the right return, there are very few players in the major leagues, in my mind, who for the right return aren't tradable. So I think you would listen on anyone in the right situation. Now, I think if you start talking about guys they may consider trading, that have value. I mean, Donovan comes to mind because he's versatility, and that he can play a lot of different positions and would have a lot of value for other teams. So if you could trade a Donovan for a frontline pitching prospect or a potential middle of the order um, bat that could you could count on for 25 to 35 homers moving forward. I think that'd be interesting. I mean, like I said, I don't I if I was a front office, you're listening on everybody. I mean, obviously there's certain guys that they'd have to, like, to trade Mason Wynn, you would have to get offered a lot. Um, but I think when you're in the position the Cardinals are in right now, I think you listen on everybody. But I think probably if you're talking about somebody, um, maybe Burleson or Donovan are players that are good players that might bring you the return that you're looking for for maybe 2 years from now being all-star players, or whenever you think your next window to win the World Series is. I mean, look, I'm with Kyle. Like, I think if you go out and add two or three players to the current roster, could they compete for the playoffs next year? Yeah, I think so. Um, but it certainly feels like they're probably going to trade the three guys that we've talked about and maybe look for their window to be a little bit further down the line than next year. I think they've said in some ways they want to win the World Series, not just make the playoffs, which I would argue that if you make the playoffs, you have a chance to win the World Series. So, um, yeah, I guess if I had to say, I would say the guys with value um, that could bring you something would be probably Donovan's probably the one guy I think a lot of teams would value because of his versatility. That he can play a bunch of different positions.
No question
I
about
think
it.
it'll
Is there
also
some?
be. Sorry, Jim. I don't mean to cut you off. I think it'll
Go,
also be interesting on a guy like Donovan or Mason Wynn. Those are guys that I think in general should be extended. But I kind of wonder if over the next year and a half, some of those extensions get put on hold across the league as the CBA gets worked out, or with a little bit of forecasting from these GMs, they say, "Hey, these are guys you need to get locked up now because of what's going to happen in the CBA." So I think that's going to tie into it a little bit.
potential work stoppage to me is a backdrop for this whole thing anyway. But Kyle, with the situation for the Cardinals now, and I agree, I think if they added, um, they'd probably be in a good position to make the playoffs again. They need pitching. And in my opinion, to get the pitching they need, they're going to have to trade somebody, right? I mean, do you see it that way, or am I on an island on that?
Well, I don't think you're on an island. I don't ever want you to be on an island, Jim. We're here
It's
with you.
nice.
All right. I think that yeah, I think everybody that if you look at the teams who didn't make the playoffs, my guess is they are short on pitching. Um, and I think in general, preventing runs tends to be cheaper than scoring runs. So, yes, if I was going to say, how am I going to, if I'm going to not tear it down, but if I'm going to really start here, my focus is going to be on some of these young pitchers that have come up and have gotten some work. And, whichever guys those are, getting Quinn Matthews up here and seeing what you have. And, yeah, if you're going to trade Donovan, which I'm totally against because of his clubhouse presence and everything else, then you need to get another guy like a Quinn Matthews type prospect that you can have control of and is going to be preventing runs for the next 6 years. Um, because I think to me, that's just a really good way to start, building a team. And, you see what the Mariners did. We talked a lot about the Mariners pitching staff, leading up to this postseason. And, I think they had a pretty good advantage on salary and roster construction because of where that starting pitching is control wise.
And the Cards have a ton of good young pitching waiting in the wings. The question is, what about the upcoming season? That's why I think they're going to be forced to make a trade. Another guy that I always find interesting, Matt, because of his skill set, is Lars Nootbaar. Now, Lars didn't have a great year last season, but apparently he was dealing with heel issues. He had surgery on both. There's a guy who has a good eye for the strike zone. He takes walks when he's right. Also has some pop in his bat. And he's a guy that you hear connected to, possibly being traded at some point. We don't know, and we're not saying we want to see anything like that. But what do you think the Cardinals have in Lars Nootbaar?
Yeah, I mean, to me, he's kind of a question mark as far as, I mean, I think we've seen glimpses of a really, really good player, like you mentioned, that can hit for power, um, that can play defense, hits left-handed, seems to have a very infectious personality that the guys like to be around. Um, but he's another one for me. I just don't not 100% sold on who he is as a player moving forward. As far as where do you hit him in the lineup? Is he a leadoff type? Could he be a middle of the order bat? Um, can he play center field? Is he, does he have to play the corner? Um, I don't know. I don't know. Um, to me, he's a player that I kind of want to see what his next step is. I think he's getting to that time in his career. I think he's probably 26 or 27 now at this point. Um, that would be coming into kind of the prime years of his career. And so I think that that's really when you know who a guy is. Like, the first few years, you're kind of developing, learning the league. Um, you're making adjustments, you're getting better. But I think by 27, 28 years old, we should have a pretty firm handle of who you are and what you're going to be able to do in the league. So I think this year is an important year for him. Um, I don't know I know he hits the ball really hard, his exit velos, and there's some metrics that teams like. So I think there would be some interest and value in a trade, but yeah, I'm interested to see what this year looks like for him.
Yeah, he's had trouble staying on the field because of injuries. But Kyle, you play with him, and I know you're, a fan of guys who bring energy in the clubhouse. He's one of those guys.
Yeah, he was in my mind. He and Donovan are two of the tone setters for that team, and I just pulled him up this year because I didn't know, some of the what was kind of going into it. But I look at the numbers compared to his first three full seasons in the big leagues. Obviously, you can see there was some health issues there. This is the first year of a full season that he had below a 759 OPS. I mean, you're talking about a guy who's an above average hitter, above average defender, and can play all three outfield positions. Yeah, I mean, could you want a little bit more slug? Sure. But, this was also the first time they played more than 117 games. So, like you said, I think being on the field and having that availability tool is important. But, if he's available, he might be a 20 homer guy. He's a high on base guy. And I think every team would be interested in that. And, now maybe because of his arbitration status here, maybe he's, not something that, the Cardinals want to, kind of go forward with. But man, I think what he means to that locker room and what he means to that team is pretty important.
All right, so the last topic for this edition of Cardinal Territory is something we've talked about before, but as the Cardinals try to project their future, you have to look at Jordan Walker because we all know how talented he is. And he's had ups and he's had downs and then he's had more downs. So, Matt, you're a veteran guy who's been around baseball a long time. You have kids who play professional baseball. If you were handling Jordan Walker, who I know you know is very talented, how would you handle trying to get him back on track that he can be something that will benefit the Cardinals?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think that you can talk about swing mechanics. You can talk about him needing to hit the ball in the air more. Obviously, the physicality would want you to hit the ball in the air when you hit it that hard. Um, so I think that if I was working with him, I would just try to find out where he's comfortable. I think a lot of times when you start trying to make big hitting adjustments or try to create a different outcome, particularly when it comes to hitting it higher. Guys get uncomfortable and they don't know where to put their hands. They don't know what they want to do with their stride. Am I a leg kick guy? Am I a toe tap guy? Am I just a stride guy? Do I? So I think I would want him to get comfortable, and then I think there's a couple tweaks with how you load your body, um, to where you make contact a hair further out front. I don't want him trying to pull the ball in the air. Like, I don't think that's a good hitting approach, and I don't think that's effective anyways. But I do think there's ways, that if you get your mechanics just slightly tweaked, to where the ball, you're not coming forward, as the ball's coming in, and then you're constantly always hitting it onto the top because you're moving forward, the ball's coming fast, to where, to get him to kind of remain over his backside a little longer, so that the contact point is a little bit more behind, his head's more behind, and he can drive the ball to right center more. I think tapping into his power potential for me is more to right center than it is to the pool side. Um, so I I don't know. I mean, I think that, again, he's another guy where you look at potential and you dream on what his upside could be, but he's still young. But at some point, like, the production, if you're going to play in the playoffs, the production in a corner outfield spot, you can't. I don't know. Kyle could probably pull it up. I don't know what his OPS was this year, but um, you can't have a right fielder that isn't producing, some power, and a pretty high. I do admire. I think he has gotten better in the outfield. He seems to be moving around better out there, and he has a very strong arm. But he's another one for me. Is a question mark. I think this is a big year for him, as far as, is he part of your future or not. I'm going to need to see a little bit more, consistent production for me to consider him like a pillar moving forward.
And with Jordan, he got some coaching when he was at Double A, and he just basically said they simplified it. They moved his hands out a little further, and they told him the main thing is kind of, you touched on it, Matt, is they just want him to have his body moving forward toward the ball, not pulling off. And he got it for a while, and then he fell back into some bad habits. So, Kyle, my question is, like, on a pitching standpoint, a guy's got great stuff, right? And the mechanics just keep kind of getting messed up along the way. How do how would you try to fix that with a young pitcher who you've seen do it, who, there were some adjustments mechanically that were made, but then he loses it again?
Yeah, I think I got a really good piece of advice somewhere in like 2016, 2017. I'd struggled in 2016, and I was in my head trying to get back to where I was in 2015, right? And the piece of advice was, it's really easy to chase ghosts, and you need to be real with the player that you are right now and be honest with the player that you are right now. Jordan Walker obviously had a great rookie season, right? 787 OPS, looking at the numbers, awesome. All right. He's now 2 years removed from that, and he might be a little bit different player, and that's okay. But he is only 23 years old, about to be in his 24-year-old season. There's no way in my mind that you give up on that guy unless you're just blown away by the offer. Getting like a pitching prospect. But I think if I'm talking to Jordan, I'm like, listen, buddy, I know everybody wants to see you in that rookie year production, but we can't be chasing ghosts. All right. You've got to become the best form of the player you are right now. Let's take your strengths. Let's, really expand on those and how we can help get them to show up on a daily basis. And that's, to your point, that's what I would tell a pitcher. It's like, hey, the league has now seen you for 3 years. What are your strengths? What can we do to build on those strengths and to use what you have right now? Because you may not be the exact same guy that you were 2 years ago.
Gentlemen, really good stuff, as always. That's going to do it for this week from Matt Holliday for Kyle Gibson and Lance Lynn, who's in a tree stand somewhere, or maybe gutting an elk. I don't know. But that's going to do
Deer.
it
He's
for
in
Cardinal.
whitetail season, Jim. It's whitetail
All right.
season, not elk. He's in Ohio, not Montana. Come on. Next
Sorry.
week, we're talking about which beat writers are getting kicked off, by the way. Just letting you know, that was unfair that we didn't touch on that subject.
Okay, we will start with that, and I will brush up on my hunting season so I know what we're talking about. That's going to do it for this edition of Cardinal Territory. We'll see you next time. Hopefully, that edition won't suck.